Welcome to the FAQ video about the qualifying. Here you get to know the different qualifying modes and their conditions and other general informations about the qualifying. In general, as already said in the schedule FAQ video, there is a chat ban on the grid server. In all qualifying modes you have to obey the line towards the track at the pit exit. Otherwise you get a drive-through penalty which you have to attend immediately. In qualifying modes where you are on track with other drivers the same time, you should look out for blue flags on your outlap. In addition, it's better to look out for enough space in front of you before your outlap, otherwise you may close up to an opponent in front of you. When the qualifying is over, you should leave the pits to wait for the start, but don't leave the pit lane and enter the track. The tracker qualifying. The tracker qualifying isn't a qualifying directly before the race, but round about 2 weeks before the race. In this time you have to drive on the grid servers to set your qualifying time. The tracker qualifying ends on the event day 8 PM German time. After this, the grid order is defined by the best times of the tracker qualifying and will be announced by the admin. So you got nearly 2 weeks to set your lap time in this qualifying. Time qualifying. With the time qualifying you got a certain period of time to do your qualifying laps. Usually these are 10 to 15 minutes where you can drive as you please, but pay attention to the general qualifying behavior. After the end of the time qualifying, the race will usually start shortly after a break, so make sure you left the pits. Usually the admin also will announce that he will start the race shortly. Lap qualifying. With the beginning of the lap qualifying, all drivers are spectating. The admin then call every single driver to leave the pits. This driver can do his outlap and 1 or 2 hot laps depending on the event announcement. After the last hot lap you jump immediately back to spectating. How many drivers and how big the gaps are is decided by the admin, but you usually have enough space around you to do your hot laps undisturbed. To assure these conditions for everyone, you should not take too much time for your outlap or heat up your tires in an intense way, so the driver behind you don't catch up to you. If you can't set a time because you crashed, for example, you have to start at the end of the grid. After all drivers did their laps, all drivers should leave their pits and wait for the start. The 1 and 2 shot qualifying. The 1 or 2 shot qualifying is a mix between time qualifying and lap qualifying. You got, depending on the event announcement, 1 or 2 tries for 1 hot lap. When to do your hot laps is your decision, but there's an overall time limit of usually 10 to 15 minutes for it. Especially in this mode you have to pay attention for blue flags during your outlap and move out of the way as soon as possible. In case of the 2-shot qualifying you're not allowed to do the 2 hot laps after another. So you have to jump back spectating after your first hot lap. After the qualifying all drivers leave their pit and wait for the start. Sprint qualifying. The sprint qualifying isn't a usually qualifying, but a qualifying race. In advance of the event there will be a tracker qualifying of which the result is taken for the grid order of the sprint qualifying. The sprint qualifying is a short race with a couple of laps with no points at the end, but with the starting order of the real race. After this qualifying the real race will start, so be ready and especially out of the pit, in case you want to change your setup. If you don't finish the sprint qualifying, you have to start from the end of the grid. Hardcore and race fuel conditions. Hardcore or race fuel conditions are additional conditions which could be valid for all of the previous qualifying modes. This is announced in the championship schedule. But usually these conditions are only used with the time qualifying. With hardcore conditions you can leave the pit lane only once. In other words, this means if you jump back into the pit or into spectator mode your qualifying is over. With the race fuel conditions, even the jumping to the pits or spectator mode is forbidden. This means you have to do your qualifying with the setup and amount of fuel you want to start a race. Even after the qualifying and in the leg lap you aren't allowed to jump to pit or spectator mode. If you ignore this ban, your qualifying is over and you have to start from the end of the grid. With each of both conditions you can of course drive to the pits during the qualifying to change your tires or adjust your setup. But keep in mind that setup changes are carried over into the race, so you should plan some time in the end of the qualifying to reverse your setup changes for the race. The admin do not have to wait for your changes, so do them in time. 。 This was the FAQ video for the different qualifying modes. Now you can click on the left side to get back into the overview in the main FAQ video, or click on the right side to get to the next FAQ video about the race.